So I want to give a very warm welcome to Andre Webster. He is a pastor at Al Shaddai Church as well as a sexuality counselor. So I want to say welcome, Andre, and thank you so much for your time today.
Antoinette, it's so good to be with you, and I'm really excited for the discussion that we're going to be having.
Yes, it is very exciting. So I want to actually start with asking you, how did you get into the sexuality counselor area? How did that start for you?
All right, so I was a teacher for 12 years, and then my wife and I, we started a Year of Your Life program, and we had people coming from all over the world. And during that time, we had incredible moments with people and their experiences and trying to create leadership from them. But we always got to this point where there was an issue around sexuality. Maybe there was an abuse, maybe there was some kind of shame linked to their sexuality. And being a pastor, all I said was, you know what, here's a scripture, think about it, put it on, and it will go away. And of course, it didn't happen. And I got to the point where I was over it. I just thought, you know, as the church and as a man of God, I really need to find out more about this. So I decided to try and find a theological seminary that could help me, and there was none that actually dealt with sexuality directly. So I eventually found the Academy of South Africa Sexology, and I did my degree through them. And so since then, I finished that about 3 years ago. I'm busy doing my master's. I decided to look at a biblical worldview. And how can one actually then see what has God made? And it's so exciting. It really is so exciting how so much of science dovetails to God's incredible plan for sexuality. Yes. So that's how I got into it. And that's why I counsel as well as provide workshops, and I'm doing some publishing.
Okay. So talking about the male species, right? How do men view sex? I want to talk to you about the difference between men and women. So let's start with the men. How do they view sex?
Okay. Men view sex from the perspective that they love excitement and orgasm. Okay, so now let's put that into the big scheme of things. If we look at the normal sexual cycle, you have desire first, then you have excitement, then you have plateau, then you have orgasm, and then you have resolution. Okay. And for some reason, the way God made men, and please, I'm generalizing here, all right? And it's nice to know this is research, so it's helpful. Okay.
Yes.
For some reason, God made men to really enjoy excitement and orgasm, all right? And so if we then look at how men perceive or understand sex, they see it as something that is exciting and that is going to end in this most vulnerable space where I'm going to be completely uncontrolled in my muscular and physical being with hopefully somebody I love. And somebody that I've connected to, and in my context, it would be somebody that I've made a covenant marriage relationship with.
Yes.
And so that's how men generally tend to perceive sex. Does it mean that they don't want desire? Absolutely not. Does it mean that the plateau phase, which normally happens after penetration, isn't important to them? No. But in general, it's all about the excitement of it and then this incredible experience of orgasm. And that's why, you know, many women will say, for men, it's just wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, you know?
Yes.
And that's not the truth. It's just the way we were made.
Yes.
And so for women to understand that, for us men to understand that as well, has been hugely helpful for me as I've counseled couples as well.
Yes, and I think there is a difference. I mean, there is a difference between men and women. And from the women's perspective, how do women view sex?
So generally, women will focus more on the desire phase and the plateau phase. And so from my perspective, I say, God, what the heck? You know, why do women like different phases to men in this wonderful sexual cycle, you know? Yeah. And so at the end of the day, I see it as just so typical of God. He actually wants us to be so united in the way that we work with each other to have good sex at the end of the day. So what does that mean? Women will tend to view sex as being something that is way more emotional and intimate. And so they really want to be pursued and they want to be desired. And they want to have this emotional connection that makes the whole act meaningful. And so, you know, excitement for a woman, most of the time, she doesn't even know that she's excited, all right? Whereas for men, we know we're excited, and the woman knows we're excited, okay?
Yeah.
But she's feeling so much more. And you know, if you look in research, Besson has his sexual cycle specifically for women. And part of that sexual cycle doesn't even include much about orgasm. And that shows how differently women perceive sex. Is orgasm important to them? I think it is. I don't think we must never say women don't want orgasm, but it's not the most important thing compared to men, where actually it's all about that for many of them. All right. And then, so she would tend to like desire more and then plateau, which is that phase before orgasm takes place, where you have the release of endorphins, you have this sense of closeness between her and her spouse or the person she's having sex with, and just this extreme closeness and vulnerability. And obviously for men, that period is often shortened and shortened and shortened. And it's actually for us men to realize we can extend that period, because that is a time where our wives are going to feel so fulfilled, feel so loved, so connected to, which is actually the key. And I want to say, in speaking about these differences between men and women, we've got to realize that it's not for us to take these differences and use them as weapons.
Yes.
And that is a big issue for men and women. We now know, yeah, you like orgasm and excitement. Yeah, you like desire and plateau. And so we use it against each other. Instead of saying, okay, that's the case. How can we now maximize the experience so that we can actually learn from each other? And me as a man, how can I learn to appreciate plateau better and desire better? For my wife to know, how can I appreciate excitement and orgasm more? And so for me, that is how we are different, but actually how we can learn from each other and appreciate the fullness of what sex can be at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I also think how to give more instead of take more. How to actually, you know, what is, you know, the question that you should really ask is, what can I contribute to this relationship? Instead of, what am I not getting, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, you know, the act of sex, the world would say that when you have a relationship, you become intimate by jumping into bed. And I would rather say that sex comes at the end of us undressing our heart, undressing our mind, undressing our emotions, and then only taking off our clothes.
And I love that.
So in this process, you see, there's so much giving.
Yes.
There's so much listening. There's so much regulating responses and reactions, so that we can actually hear each other and communicate and give meaningfully. And in the process, we're going to receive more meaningfully. And I think that's the key.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. So now we've been married for years, but we've also not have sex for years. How do you, you know, how serious is that for a marriage, and how do you manage that?
Okay. Right. I think for me, you know, there are lots of reasons why people don't have sex. And I obviously deal with many people who are in that place. And I always say, you know, we've got to start with the physical. Go and find out if there is anything wrong physiologically with you. Go and check your hormone levels. Go and go and see if for a woman you have vaginismus or anything like that, where there's an incapacity to receive the penis. For a man, go and check, check your hormones, check whether there's a reason, there's a prostatic problem in terms of there being erectile dysfunction or a fear around it, or early ejaculation, which has caused incredible shame. So we deal first with the physical. Then after that, once we understand that everything is hunky-dory, we're okay in terms of the physical, then we start dealing with the emotional and the thinking and the thoughts and belief systems. All right. And for me, one of the biggest belief systems is, did God make sex? Is this actually meant to be part of our relationship or not? And I think for too long, the church has not said it can be the case. And I yearn for the time when people wanting good sex come to the church to find it, because all believers should be having the most incredible sex. Anyway, that's by the way. All right. But I think for me, we didn't speak about all of the hormones that are released during the sexual cycle. But during orgasm, you have the release of attachment hormones, and that's oxytocin in women and vasopressin in men. And so when we start understanding that sex ends with incredible attachment, now these are very powerful attachment hormones, and they're not actually discerners of what you attach to. And that's why for me, heterosexual monogamous sex is the most powerful sex, because then you are attaching over and over and over to the same person within a covenant relationship, you see. And so for me, I would understand that that is what is missing at the end of the day. Does it mean that you can only attach with sex and orgasm? Absolutely not. Obviously not. Yeah. But it certainly is a very powerful way in which you can attach. The other thing is, it's been proven that sex actually increases our health. I think because of all of the changes in our physiology, the increased heart rate and all those kinds of things, we've become more healthy. And so that is good for a marriage. Apparently we will live longer. All right. It increases our sense of fulfillment, not only in the bed, but actually in general. There's this heightened sense of fulfillment and joy, a sense that we can actually experience, wonderful joy, which is not only happiness, but being able to cope with difficult times. So it increases our resilience in terms of how are we going to cope with those difficult times, and tough times are going to be the reality of our lives. And I just want to say all of these are signs of an intimate, and I would say now, an intimate sexual experience with somebody that is always in our corner. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about the sexual act, is that if it's done in that context, you're solidifying the fact that I always have someone in my corner. And so that for me is one of the most beautiful things about it within marriage, and why I would say, sex needs to be a part of our experience in marriage relationships. When it comes to frequency, we've got to realize that, we can't say that you've got to have sex every week or anything like that. We've got to actually value and honor different relationships. I know some couples that have sex up to 4 times a day, which is, most men will say that can't happen. All right. But I also know of some couples that only have sex maybe once every 2 months. And sometimes I think their level of intimacy concerning communication may be higher than those that have sex a lot. So I don't think we must ever judge and say one is better than the other. I think we've got to really value what we have and what it's doing in the relationship at the end of the day. Okay,
so you say that person should be in your corner, right? So now this person is not in my corner. I feel alone. I feel like I am initiating everything. Or I don't feel like doing anything anymore for the relationship. I think there are a lot of people out there that hasn't had sex for years, but they are still married. They are co-parenting. what would you say to them?
Well, what I'd say to them is that, you know what? Sex is a beautiful expression of intimacy. And I would say that there is some breakdown in that intimacy script. And that can be as a result of something that has happened in their relationship. But most often, relational intimacy breakdown is the result of an intimacy script that has been broken down in our life. And so I would often encourage couples to start realizing there is more that we can get out of life. And part of that is us dealing with our pain. And so you know, there's a wonderful guy that writes about intimacy, and he says, you know, if couples can realize that painful gridlocks leapfrog them into wonderful moments of intimacy and the possibility of good sex, then they would not run away from painful experiences. Yes. And I think that's one of the beautiful realities, is that, you know, our neocortex, which is at the top of our brain, you know more of this about this than I do, Antoinette. It makes us most human. Yes. And it's that part of the brain that we actually develop our intimacy script, because our humanity is the one thing that causes us to have the capacity to overcome gridlocks and painful arguments and destructive words and actions. And so, you know, that for me is the most important thing. And so for me, in dealing with couples that are struggling with this and have given up to a large extent, I tend to say, you know what, let's take sex off the table. Let's just look at what does it mean to be a healthy human and to actually interact in a healthy human way. And so really I'm minimizing, and I'm taking a big topic down to a very simple way of seeing it.
No, definitely.
And I help people to say, okay, we've got to learn to name our emotions, to claim them as our own, to tame them, because actually we can, and then to tame them in the right way. So name, claim, tame, and aim. And what I found is people that have been through the most traumatic experiences in life, you know, when they've been able to actually face that and face the pain and name it for what it is. Yes. Name it that I am hurt. Yes. I am frustrated. I'm angry. I'm all these things that, unfortunately, in my context, we as charismatic Christians have said, you're not allowed to name. Anyway, let's go beyond that. But we've actually got to name it. We've got to fess up to it. We've got to say, this is how I actually feel. But then we've got to claim it as our own, and not say that it's because of others and therefore they must carry my pain or they must carry my emotion. And then we've got to tame it, and we've got to know that we have a maker that has given us the capacity to tame this painful emotion. And, you know, that goes back to the fact that I don't think many of us were raised in families that helped us to name and claim our emotions. You know, they weren't allowed to exist, let alone empower us to know that we can actually tame it. And for us to actually know we mustn't be fearful of our emotions, we can actually tame them. And then to actually take it, once we've tamed it, then we can aim it. We can even aim the energy of our anger into our relationship with our spouse. And so in that process, I've found that people have been able to shift from being completely separated to actually realizing I can do work with my own heart. Yes, and I can also know that in the process of dealing with my own heart, my spouse can deal with his or hers, and we can actually then connect at a deeper level. And and in many cases, it has resulted in good sex, which is great.
Yes. You know, my next question here would have been, you know, if you want to go for counseling, your partner doesn't want to go for counseling, I would say to them, you go for counseling. Because what I do in my practice as well is, let's work on you. Let's get you in a better space. Because what is happening is you've got this gap where you're sitting at the moment. And as soon as you work on yourself, the gap closes. You're not necessarily going to be there, but the gap will definitely shift, or the energy will shift. And yeah, no, you have to. And so I love that you say that, you know, you can work on yourself first, and you should actually. You should.
Yeah, I think for me, I love what you're saying in terms of, yes, go for the counseling. I always say go for the counseling and work on yourself, not trying to change your partner.
Exactly.
Because I've had people, and I'm sure you have, that have come into your counseling room and they're wanting to find out information so they can change their partner, you know, and that's not helpful at the end of the day. I think we're on the same page there. That is for sure. Yeah.
Not happening. Not happening. Yeah. Living with resentment. Resentment as in you're irritated, as in you've got a grudge. How do we move beyond that?
Yeah. You know what? I think we all carry grudges and we all need to acknowledge them. And I'm sorry to say again, we need to name, claim, tame, and aim the grudge. We've really got to find out where is the root of it. Yeah. And I always love that statement, you know, offense is not given, it is taken. And so if we realize that actually we take offense, and so we've got to realize what is the underlying issue that is causing me to take that offense. And if we're willing to go there, if we're willing to really understand that, and then share it with the offender, I think the offender will realize, oh man, they were just so inappropriate or unaware of what was really going on in my mind, that will actually break down, you know, the barrier that was set up. So yes, it is a bit of becoming self-aware, becoming vulnerable with oneself, understanding what has caused me to take that offense, and then having courage to share that, you know, and say, not blame the person that they said it. You know, I think I love the statement, you know, we all have our own perceptions and they're ours, they're not right and wrong. And so for us to be able to speak to our partner who we have resentment against and say, you know, my perception is not right, but this is true for me. This is the reality for me.
It is. Yeah.
When you said that, it triggered this. And it's caused me to, you know, build up a wall. And I want to bring down that wall today. So this is what you said. This is how I heard it. And, you know, can you understand? And yeah. So I think that's one way. I think there are other ways, but that's helpful.
I always tell people, when there's a trigger, there's an opportunity.
That's great.
And that is how you should look at it, because, you know, anybody can pull that trigger, but you are the one, and this is Gabor Mate that's always saying that is, but you are the one that's carrying the ammunition. And the amount of ammunition is that's, you know, that's yours to work through. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
Sure. So how do we get the sparkle back in the bedroom?
Okay, you just tell everybody you've got to do it. No. Okay, we're not Nike. Okay, all right. So that is a very good and important question. You know what? I think one of the ways, and there are obviously lots of ways, but one of the ways is to know how to park it and move on. I think if we are actually, if we're becoming emotionally mature, we are able to realize that we can park something knowing that it's going to be addressed and allow ourselves to be in the present. Okay. And I know that this is probably not, and I would suggest that couples don't try and do this when they're in the heat of wanting sex. But But you know, when they know that there's a reoccurring issue that is happening, to actually be honest about it and just say, okay, you know what, we're going to park this, we're going to commit to focusing on it. We are going to commit to actually getting some kind of resolution on it.
Okay, sorry. So I'm just going to stop you there. So when you say park it, you mean you're going to stand still there? You're actually going to spend time there?
No, what
with
I
the
am
issue.
saying, okay, thank you for clarifying. I'm saying that we can actually say that issue we are going to put in a box and we're going to move on. But we're not putting it in a box and saying it's not going to be resolved.
Okay.
We're putting it in a box to say it is going to be a result and I commit to it. Okay. In the commitment to resolve it, one can then move on into experiencing each other. Okay, so that's one way. Another way is to actually just look at the firsts of your relationship. You know, to start realizing, you know, that all these first times when we did things, they can actually recreate a spark. You know, when did I notice you first? All right. I noticed your bottom, or I noticed your eyes. I noticed the way you spoke. I loved the way that you interacted with other people. Your laugh was infectious. And I think many people forget these things. And so they actually are so focused on the negatives that they forget these beautiful experiences that they've had, that are all a treasure trove that can be opened in these times. Sharing something new and refreshing that you've learned about yourself and your other is just a beautiful thing. But there I also need to say that we've got to then have parked the issues, because often we can say, you know, I've learned that I really love touch in this way, but we know that it's an issue that you don't like touching me. So, you know, that's where we've got to be careful. Yeah. But certainly, you know, we've got to realize we're human beings, and this side of heaven, we're always going to be learning about ourselves. Yeah. And if we stop that process, then we actually become fossils. We become fossils, and we might as well be a rock and a stone. And I don't think anybody wants a relationship with those people. And I think, you know, if we can express a newfound learning of ourselves and then of each other, you know, that also engages into this whole process of intimacy, which is knowing and being known at the end of the day. Yes. And that becomes a very precious thing. And then just the last thing that I can say for now is, you know, to learn that our differences, we can actually use them to feed our love. You know what, obviously in bed, you know, and now I'll be a bit more sexual, really to find out what you like and what you don't like. I think many couples don't even know what they like. Exactly. Let alone then having to help their partner experience or, you know, what they like. And so I would really encourage people to work that out and to be able to share that, because at different stages of the sexual cycle, different things happen in our body that cause us to have different sensations. Yes. And you know, we've got to stop thinking that we're all made the same and we all have the same sensations and all those kinds of stuff, and projecting those onto our spouse. And to actually understand, you know, when is the clitoris at a different place on her body more sensitive than at other times? And when is his penile shaft more sensitive than the frenulum, or whatever it is? But, you know, many times we don't know ourselves. And so I often would encourage couples, you know, just get to know yourself so that you can share yourself more freely with your spouse, and that can just create a whole new level of spark. Yeah, and the word I think the word there is explore a little bit more, and then also I just want to add, you know, I think active recovery, it means active. In other words, you have to act from your side. Just start or just do something.
And then I also just want to add where you said that awareness in yourself and awareness in your partner. So I don't think you know this, Andre, but I'm doing a brain profile workshop now on the 22nd of February, where I actually look at people. What is your default way of thinking? What is your partner's default way of thinking? And how that and knowing what your expectations are of your partner. It's such a huge difference when you know that, because of your communication skills, everything will change because you understand what the other person thinks, you know.
Oh, I love that, Antoinette. Maybe I'll come and join it. Hey?
Yeah, why not? But Andre, please tell us more about your workshops. What do you do? Where can people reach you? What do you do?
Yeah, so basically, I obviously do counseling, and that's for couples as well as singles. I look at, I wish it were always couples just wanting better sex, but it's most often the problems, eh? And obviously, sexuality addictions are a reality, and I think more so today in a hypersexualized world. So,
yes,
yeah, just helping people with that. Then we've created a number of workshops, and one that we love and many people get a lot of health and healing from it's called Fearful and Wonderful Sexuality. It's a 4-night workshop, and basically we give a biblical worldview, but then we look at healthy sexuality development over our lifetime. And what we find is that it not only gives people a framework with which they can raise their children or their grandchildren and have a better sexuality and existence, as well as good sex at the end of the day, but it also really encourages people to embrace their sexuality, which we don't do.
Yes.
So that's that workshop. We do raising sexually healthy 0 to 7-year-olds. That's just an afternoon workshop with parents, raising sexually healthy pre-adolescents, and then one for adolescents as well. We do a date night for couples, and that's with the express purpose of helping them have good sex. And nice. So it's a 3-course meal. We look at the art of desire, the art of
are you doing the foreplay, Andre? That's the foreplay.
Yes. And the art of touch, and then the art of orgasm, but we don't actually then talk about that at the end. Okay, so leave it there. Then we do something called the single scoop, because I think that the world, and I think especially the church, has really undermined being single. You know, how often do we speak about marriage, about parenting, but we don't actually speak about being single. And so often we say to single people, oh, well, you're waiting for your man or your woman. And we're saying that the ultimate state is marriage. Yes. So we really understand, we've got to help single people deal with their sexuality. It's not something you can switch off, man. And to know that it's not evil, it's not demonic, that it's something that we can actually use for good at the end of the day.
Yes.
So those are some of our workshops. And yeah, we obviously have facilitated training for people to actually facilitate those workshops. And we're just very excited when we see the wonderful, breakthroughs in people's lives and shame being broken off them, which is a beautiful gift and what keeps us going.
That is superb. I honestly think that there's people should talk more about sex. People should explore a little bit more, in the marriage. And Andre, I think you are doing great work. I take my hats off to you. And I really want to thank you for your time today.
It's my pleasure. And Antoinette, thank you so much. I really do appreciate the opportunity. Okay.
Thanks so much.